Hello, everyone. My name is Tanya Churchill, and I heard that you wanted to learn about black bears or any kind of bears. Generally, when we talk about bears here, we talk about either black bears or grizzly bears. And there are more black bears where I live on the east coast of North Carolina than there are grizzly bears. We don't really have grizzly bears on the east coast. So as far as a map goes, this is where I am right now in Holly Springs, North Carolina. Like I say, it's on the East Coast where we have more black bears than grizzly bears. And I used to live up here in New York where the yellow dot is. And I have some personal stories about seeing black bears up in New York. So I just wanted to show you where these two places were in relation to where bears live and in relation to where I am in the United States. And I'll tell you some of those stories a little bit later. Bears are primarily native to North America, which means it's not only the United States, but they are in Canada and Alaska as well, and even in northern parts of Mexico, which is down here. So that's where you're going to find bears. Now, black bears primarily live in wooded areas. It doesn't have to be mountains, although you do typically see bears where there are mountains. But they generally like places where there are lots of trees, forests. Black bears are good at climbing trees, but grizzlies, not so much. Grizzly bears, we think of as being more fierce bears, more dangerous, more aggressive. And grizzly bears have longer claws, and they are not good for climbing trees. Whereas a black bear has shorter claws, and they are easier to grip the tree trunks and to climb up the trees. So that's why you see I have this picture right here of the black bear climbing the tree. So this wouldn't be so much a grizzly bear that you would see doing this. Now, before I go much further, I want to explain to you that these slides that I have put together were actually not created by only me. Last year, we collaborated with some kindergartners in Rose Hill Public Schools in Sydney, Australia. And they wanted to learn about some animals that we had in America. And we learned about some animals that they have in Australia that we don't have here. One neat one that we learned about from Australia was the bilby. And we learned about the bilby around Easter time and realized that the bilby is more common for their Easter animal. Like we have the Easter bunny that we use to symbolize Easter here in Australia. They have the bilby. But one thing that they don't have are bears. And I understand that you do not have bears either. So this was a slide presentation that we put together with the kindergartners at Rose Hill Public School. And they did some research and they found out some things from us, and we communicated on Twitter. And they started to put this slideshow together, and I added some information to it as well. So these are not only my slides, but they mostly belong to the Rose Hill kindergartners who are now first graders this year. So I will continue with black bears. So for my next slide, they have inserted a short video about black bears. And it's only about 2.5 minutes long, and it really easy to understand and doesn't have a whole lot of information. I'm switching over here to present mode so that you can see the slides better. It doesn't have a whole lot of information about bears, but what it does have is good information, really easy to understand, and they're the basic facts about bears. I'm not going to play it for you now, but you have access to the slides, and you are welcome to play that. All right, so as we go down here, this is a slide that the kindergartners added. They were practicing using Google Slides and labeling pictures, and they've labeled the black coat of the bear here. Now, black bears don't have to be only black. They might be kind of a sandier brown color, lighter brown colors, and there are even actually white black bears. But they are very rare, and that has to do with genes and biology. But primarily they're going to be darker black, and oftentimes they'll have a white spot on the front of their chest. So this would be the black bear. A grizzly bear is a lighter brown color. And even though there are some light brown colored bears that are black bears, you can usually tell the difference between a brown black bear and a brown grizzly bear, because the grizzly bears are much bigger and they have more defined, like bigger shoulders here. And the black bear has more of a flat area from its forehead that like that goes down. You know how we have our forehead and then our nose kind of comes out. The grizzly bear has more of a dip here, but the black bear does not. It's primarily straight. So it does have a light brown nose that they've labeled here, and then sharp claws. But remember, I said that the claws of the grizzly bear are very long claws, and the black bear's claws are very short, easier for gripping those tree trunks. All right, as we move to the next slide, there seems to be a little bit of delay with switching slides. We have the location of where they live, and I've already mentioned that. It's all of North America, which, remember, includes Canada, and Alaska is detached from what we call the continental United States, but they are in Alaska as well, and they even go as far south as part of Mexico. They come into Mexico. Even though they live mostly in the forests, they can live in more open areas, but they'll generally only go there if there are trees like near a river, and they might fish in a river or a stream to get some food. And we'll talk very shortly about what more they eat, but mostly wooded areas, but they can live absolutely anywhere. They will go anywhere where there is food, including backyards where people live. And that can get a little bit scary, but it doesn't have to be. But so they'll live generally anywhere, but mostly it will be in wooded areas. So the baby bear is called a cub. And usually the mama bear will have babies once every 2 years. And that is because the cubs are usually born in the mother's den near the end of winter time. And those cubs will stay with the mother for the whole spring and summer. And then they'll live back with the mama in the den for the next winter. And so that's 2 winters. They're born in the den one winter, and then they'll hibernate in the den the next winter with mom. But after that, the cubs go off on their own, and that's when the mama bear is able to have more babies. So it's usually once every 2 years. Generally, a bear can have 1 to 5 babies each time, but usually it's only 2. It's more common for a bear to have just 2 babies at a time, but it could be 1 up to 5. So as far as the size goes, most of my information is about black bears. Remember, grizzly bears are very similar. They're just larger, and they're more aggressive. But here's the size. So the males can be up to 600 pounds. We use pounds here, but for you, that would be 272 kilograms. The females are much smaller, and they're generally only about 200 pounds or about 91 kilograms. When they are standing on their 4 feet, so this is not when they're up on 2 feet and sitting tall, not like that, but when they have all 4 feet on the ground, from the ground to their shoulder height would be about 3 feet high or almost 1 meter. So that's not their head, but from their feet, from their feet to their shoulders would be about 1 meter high. And then how long they are is about 75 inches long, and that's about 2 meters long. And that's how long the bears generally would be. So what they eat, they are omnivores, just like humans. So they can eat meat, and humans can eat meat, but they also eat like roots and grass and berries. And here's where like living in your backyard becomes a problem. Like I say, they will eat pretty much anything, and they will live anywhere that they can find food, which means if you have trash cans that you have thrown scrap food into, they will find your trash can and they will come eat out of your trash can. If you have pets and you keep pet food outside or bird seed in bird feeders like we do here, the bears will find those too. And they have no problem coming right up to your house and finding that trash can, that container of pet food, anything that you have laying around. The bears feel like they're just welcome to come and get it. My husband is a beekeeper, and so we have beehives of honey around our property, and we've been told that there's a bear or two very close to the area that's wandering around. People have seen them, but those beehives would be something that the bears would be attracted to as well. I have not seen one in my yard, but people have taken pictures of a black bear that's pretty close to our house, living close to our neighborhood. So they are around. They, don't hang out in your yard like birds do. They pretty much stay hidden. They don't want to be near humans, but if you have, so that is primarily what bears eat. Here you see a picture of a bear eating a fish. They are not good swimmers, but fish do make a good meal for them. And so if there is a river or a stream where they can catch some fish, they have no problem wandering out into the water, not swimming in it, but standing in it. And they do have really good claws for grabbing the fish. So they're really good hunters of fish. And they enjoy fish for a good meal as well. All right, I want to advance to the next slide. I'm not sure what comes next. There's a little bit of a slow lag here. All right, so hibernating. During the spring and the summer, the bears spend a lot of time eating and getting very fat. And that is because they hibernate in the wintertime, which means that they go into a den and they primarily just sleep. There is a misconception about hibernating. People often think that when bears hibernate, that they just don't ever wake up at all. They just sleep, 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 and sleep. But that's not the case. They can wake up and they can come out of their cave or their den, and they can do some hunting for food, but that's not very often. They are very, very tired and they're not very active in the wintertime. But remember, it's not impossible to see a bear awake and walking around in the winter, but it wouldn't be for very long and they wouldn't, move very quickly, very low on energy. And primarily they do just sleep. And the reason they eat so much in the spring and the summer and also the fall is so that while they're sleeping, their heart rate slows way down and their breathing slows way down, which means that they don't need to use very many fat stores, calories to stay alive. And so their body slowly uses the fat that they accumulated in the spring, the summer, and the fall to stay alive without needing to eat in the wintertime. So hibernating in the winter for bears is something that they do, but that doesn't mean that they never wake up. It just means that they don't wake up very much, and their whole body system slows down, their heart and their breathing. So that's about a bear in the wintertime. Progress. I took these pictures at a zoo because we have bears also in the zoo. And it just repeats a lot of the information that I have already mentioned here, what it eats in the wild, but I haven't talked about its lifespan. It says in nature, usually 5 to 10 years. They can live more than 20 years, maybe even 30 years in the wild, but often in the wild, because life is hard and you don't have zookeepers that are feeding them and bringing them the food. Oftentimes, 20 would be a very old bear in the wild, although, they would have no problem if they were in captivity living to, about 30 years old. But they don't always get to age 20 when they're living in the wild. And then this is the sizes that I mentioned down here. This is kind of a neat one that students, kids, actually anybody finds interesting, is when the bears go to the bathroom, scientists can study what comes out of their body by seeing the size of what they get rid of, their poop, as we call it. Very large pieces mean that the bears are doing very well and they're eating a lot. And then smaller pieces would indicate that this is, it's either a year of drought where there isn't much food, or maybe it's a season like coming close to winter where there isn't very much food left. And so scientists can really tell a lot about a bear just based on what comes out of its body after digestion. And this is more information there. So it says biologists study bear poop, they call it scat, to figure out what and how much bears have been eating. And this is something that I did put on Twitter, and our buddies in Australia found this and they added this to the slideshow. Here's a personal story that I put on Twitter that our Rose Hill kindergartners had found too, is up in New York. Remember, that was that yellow dot closer to the north in the Adirondack Mountains we used to camp. And camping is kind of risky up there. A lot of people do it. They sleep in campers or tents. But the problem with camping in the mountains, knowing that there are lots of bears there and knowing that they will go anywhere where there's food, is that, when you're sleeping in your tent and you're camping, there isn't really a good place to keep your food, that the bears can't get to it. And so if you have leftovers, like if you're snacking in your tent at night, you're at risk of having a bear come into your tent, rip through the tent just to get the food. Now, they're not looking for humans. They don't want to eat humans. They don't want to hurt humans. They're just hungry. And so they will go anywhere where they can find that food. So often when we camped, we would have to lock up all of our food at night in our cars and put the car windows up. And then we would feel safe sleeping in the tent, even if a bear wandered by. They're not looking for us. So as long as there was no food left out, we were pretty safe, even in a tent. But if bears did wander around the campsites, a fire extinguisher was a good way to get them to run away. Nobody wants to shoot them. There's no reason to kill a bear. So rather than hurt them, we would just spray the fire extinguishers, and the white foam from that would scare them away and they would run off, and then we would be safe and the bear didn't get hurt. And so that's one thing that we would have to do when we were camping. Another thing that we would do is at dusk, when the sun is just starting to go down at the end of the day, that's typically when bears would come out. Now, we wouldn't say that bears are nocturnal necessarily. They don't always sleep during the day and be awake at night, but at dusk was a time when they felt safe to come out and do their eating. And so up in the mountains, they have these landfills here. Just where people throw their garbage away. You put the garbage in trash cans and the truck comes by and picks up all your bags of garbage and they take them to a landfill. And the bears know that this is a place where they're going to find food, because people throw away food that they don't eat. Pizza crust, egg shells, anything that they don't eat gets thrown here. And the bears would all come out. And then they would just start rummaging, finding their way through all of that garbage to find things to eat. This is a picture that my family took. And we would go, we wouldn't get very close. We would stand away, kind of back far away from the landfills. And we would just watch the bears walk out of the woods, and they would just sit around the landfill and eat. And we would take pictures. And as long as we didn't scare them, we were not worried that they were going to come towards us, although we didn't want to get very close. In case they did come towards us, we would run very quickly to our cars and get away, because bears are very powerful. And even though they don't want to hurt us, just like anything, we can't talk to them. And so if they get scared, we can't explain to them in words, it's okay, I'm not going to hurt you. So since we can't talk to them, we just leave, and we know that it's where they live more than it's where we belong. And so we respect that. And if we were bothering them at all, we would be the ones to leave. So that is kind of something fun that people do. I guess it's fun. It's kind of weird, kind of odd that people do as a fun tourist activity. If you're near where bears are, go to the dump and watch the bears eat. All right. So we talked about how bears will go any place where there's food. And so here are some pictures. These are not my pictures. I found these off the internet, but I have seen these when we visit the mountains. This is exactly what trash cans look like. People will put their trash in trash cans outside their house, and then they would put the trash cans in these metal cages. And that is because they know that if there's food in there, that the bears will come and they will, just like this picture shows, dump the trash can over and try to eat anything that it feels like would make a good meal in your trash can. And then you're left with a big mess. And so if you live where there are a lot of bears, this is something that you would see outside the houses. People would lock up their trash cans to keep the bears out. So this is a picture of a grizzly bear. This is not a black bear. We have a zoo, a rescue zoo, sort of close to our house. And people often think that it is fun to take wild animals and try to tame them and keep them as pets. And then when they grow up, they realize that these pets really can't be controlled and that it really wasn't a good idea after all. And so they get rid of these poor animals that they tried to raise from babies. And this zoo called the Aloha Safari Zoo will take these animals and rescue them and give them the best home that they can on their property, even though it's not ideal. This certainly is not a happy place for a grizzly bear to want to live. It doesn't look like the woods where it prefers to live, but at least it's safe and people are feeding it. But I thought that this would be a good picture of a grizzly bear. Notice we talked about that area between the forehead and the nose here. There's more of a curve, more of a dip there. And that's how you can tell it's a grizzly bear and not a brown black bear. The ears are also different. A grizzly bear has smaller round ears, and the black bear will have taller ears and they'll be more pointed at the top. And so this is another good way to tell that this is indeed a grizzly bear and not a black bear that might be brown. But a black bear could be this color. It could be brown. But the nose and the ears are an easy way to tell if you don't know how big it is, because he's mostly underwater. He does enjoy cooling off in the water. So we don't know how big he is. So instead of looking at his size or his claws, we can look at his ears in the area between his nose and forehead to know that this is a grizzly bear. So some questions that the Rose Hill Kinders had for me when we were working together were these, and I tried to answer them to the best of my knowledge. And what I'm going to do is start a flip grid for you. And if you have any questions for me about bears, you can ask them on Flipgrid. You don't have to type them, and then I will answer you on Flipgrid as well. I think I talked about a lot of these. Do they need to swim to catch the fish? And there is a little video that I added here, a link in the slides that show a bear fishing. And no, they don't have to swim. In fact, they don't swim well at all. They just go where they can still stand up, but where there are fish, and they use their claws to catch them. So they can catch fish in the water without ever having to swim. And as far as are they scary, they look really cute. They're fuzzy and they're big and they're just incredible to watch. But I guess they don't have to be scary if you respect them. If they're out walking around, you just have to leave them alone, and they will leave you alone. However, if it's a mama bear and she has her cubs, she might be very protective. She might be more inclined to try to scare you, to stay away from her babies if she saw you, just to protect her babies, not necessarily to want to hurt you, but just to keep you away. So you don't have to be scared of bears, but you certainly would not want to go up to a bear and pet it. Never. No way. You would never do that. But if you see one, just stay away and Yeah, and then you're fine. So they're not really dangerous unless they have a reason to come after you. So again, if you just leave them alone, you don't have anything to worry about. But you certainly don't want to surprise one. Like if it's dark out and you're walking around and then you can't see a bear and a bear can't really see you and the bear hears you, that could be kind of scary because then it would get scared and it might run after you, not knowing what you are just to get you away from it. That could be a little scary, but it doesn't have to be. So they're not mean by nature. They're just protective is what we would say. They do not have big eyes. Was one question that the Rose Hill kindergartners had about bears. Their eyes are very dark in color, and they do see very well at night. Humans don't see as well, but they do pretty well. Their eyes are in front of their head, so that makes them, easier to see at night. Oftentimes, you'll see animals that are often preyed upon have eyes on the side of their head, like deer are animals that are often hunted. And in fact, bears can kill deer if they want to. Sometimes they do eat meat and that might happen, but, deers have eyes on the side of their head so they can see both sides of, what's happening to protect themselves. But bears are more like us. They have eyes in the front and they just look ahead. And so that's one way that you can tell if an animal is a predator or a prey. Bears are more predators. They are not on the lookout for things all around them because they're powerful enough to take care of themselves and they do more of the hunting. They're not often hunted. Animals don't often go after a bear to kill it, to eat it. It's the bear that usually goes after the other animals to kill them. So their eyes are like us, but they have better sight at night. Another question is, do bears have sharp teeth? You would think because they can, kill animals and, eat raw meat, things like that, that you would think that their teeth would be very sharp. But they're omnivores like humans, remember. They eat what we eat. And so their teeth are very much like ours. They do have some pointy teeth, which are incisors, which are the pointy ones here, and they have those as well. But they also have some flatter teeth too. They don't have to have really sharp teeth to tear into only meat because eating berries does not require having sharp teeth. Eating grass and roots does not require you to have sharp teeth. Only sometimes when you're eating something tougher like meat, do you need to have those sharp teeth and the molars in our back, the flat teeth that have the bumps on them. Those are molars. You need to have those for chewing it up. But, their teeth are kind of sharp, but not as sharp as people think. They don't have to be because they have a diet like us. So they have to have teeth like us. They're just much bigger because bears are much bigger than us. Their mouths are much bigger. And again, do they have many predators? There are not very many things that would hunt them. We do not have tigers here in North America. Tigers are an animal that might want to go after a bear and make the bear their food. But since tigers do not live here, they don't really threaten the bears here. So pretty much they're top of the food chain is what we would call it here. So I do believe that is the last slide, and that's the presentation on bears that I worked collaboratively with the Rose Hill Kinders. And what I might do is invite kindergartners from this year to also hear this presentation and see if they have any questions as well, and maybe we can get them on Flipgrid too. I have not asked them yet, but I will get in contact with Leonie Marshman, who is my contact in Australia, and see if she has any kindergartners that may have studied bears this year, and see if they want to add some questions too, so maybe we can learn together. If not, it's just me and all of you, and if you've got anything else that you want to either tell me or ask me, I will get back on Flipgrid and I will answer you. So this has been a lot of fun. I can't wait to hear what kinds of questions you have, and hopefully I'll be able to find some answers for you. All right, keep in touch. Enjoy this. Bye, guys.